Welcome everyone to another Pixelated review. I'm your host, Pixelated Jordan. Now, I remember this book back in middle school, during that Twilight phase that everyone had apparently in the 2000s or mid-2000s, I don't remember. But I remember everyone talking about the sparkling vampires, the teenage werewolf people, and I remember the group I was in never bothered with it, but this book kind of popped out of nowhere. And, well, the group kind of gravitated towards that. It's like, it's about vampires, but they don't sparkle. So a lot of our friends just kind of gravitate towards this one. Now, I remember reading a few of these back in the day, but I don't remember anything about them. So I decided to go on a journey to read these books, I did that with Gregor the Overlander, didn't know it was a full series. This one, I remember it was a full series, but I never read it all. So I guess it's time to fix that problem, right? So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to review a whole series again, a second review of a series. So yeah, as you guys know, this will be spoilers. I will have a tier list for all these books. And yeah, so without further ado, let's start this review. Forgettable tier. I want to start by saying that these, they're forgettable. I really don't remember these books, at all. Both of these books, they just are they happen, and that's about it. It deals with the Vampinese lord and stuff like that, and blah, 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 blah. There's a school one in this one. I don't understand why school's in here, but, because this takes place way later. This is I don't remember. It's like the 8th or 9th or something. I don't remember. But point is, these ones were just, I could care less about these ones if they didn't really do anything for me. There's some cool stuff and the action scenes are fine, but to be honest, I don't remember much of them other than one surprising character making an appearance, and then, like I said, school, but I really wasn't interested in that one either. So yeah, these two, the Allies of the Night and Hunters of the Dusk, they go in one tier, they really are just forgettable. So yeah, it kind of sucks that this is later in the series, but it is what it is, I guess, Moving on to tier meh. I'm surprised this got big. No, really, the beginning of the story in this book, it just, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it would be that popular, at least as far as I was reading for this. It didn't make any sense that this was the start of a new franchise of sorts, if that makes sense. Overall, it's not bad, it's just not a lot going on. It really does deal with the Cirque Du Freak, which was fun, and then they have the vampire stuff going on with Mr. Krebsley. Mr. Krebsley is really cool. Not a lot was happening. It was more just here's the source of things that are happening, and then we move on. And then they left it on a cliffhanger, and all these books leaves with a cliffhanger. Maybe for a handful doesn't, but most of these books leave with a cliffhanger, and this is one that didn't need one. I wish it continued the story. It's you get a bit of a story, it's humble beginnings, and then it just ends, which kind of sucks, but the only reason why I end up continuing the story is because the characters, all the characters are fun and enjoyable to, enjoy the story with. They're colorful, they're funny, they got a lot of charm to them. And I think that's something that really lightened the mood for a lot of Cirque Du Freak books. It's because they had fun. Oh yeah, I'm using the original covers because I like these covers better, so deal with it. Anyways, back to the book. What was it about? Oh yeah, that's right. Good book. In the character department. The story, not so much happened. Other than, we are going to turn you into a vampire. And then it ends. So, yeah, not a really good start. And, well, for the next book, it doesn't get that much better either. Cirque Du Freak and the Vampire Assistant. Although better than what came before, it's about the same thing. Little plot and then characters are fun though. So it's just things are happening right now and not much is going on. Though the characters are enjoyable enough to enjoy the story, it's just that there's not much in the world of the story to enjoy. There's no stakes, there's no development of any kind. Well, there is development in this story, especially in the last one too. It just happens at the end basically, and then it leaves us with the cliffhanger as the usual. So even though this is technically less than what came before, it's still a little bit more enjoyable since we got to see more of the Cirque Du Freak itself. So there's a lot more to it, and they're definitely building up to something else. So when it comes to world building and character development, I think it does beat out just by a little bit, though not too much. I wish it just end on a cliffhanger, that's the only thing. But overall, still enjoyable. Can't really harsh it on that much too far. Just wish there was a better plot. And then we get to our next tier. Check it out. Cirque Du Freak and the Killer of the Dawn. So heavy spoilers in this one, just letting you know. To start off right away, main character dies, and it's sad, and it's like, and it's like, and we get a reveal that was plainly obvious right away, the best friend being evil and all that, yeah, it was plainly obvious, I saw it from a mile away. Though it doesn't make it bad. I think this one actually had a lot of fun when it comes down to the Hunter trilogy, I guess you can call it that. It's just that this one ended in a really good high note, and it does end in a cliffhanger as usual, but it does a lot of fun stuff in the middle of this book, and it's hard for me to say, oh, it's bad because of it. No. It's honestly very enjoyable, and it wasn't forgettable, especially with the end and how the deal ended up happening and what trickery was there. Which I think Darren's best friend is definitely an evil character, and he definitely just indulges it, and it's very good, it's very fun, it's enjoyable, so even though, he's doing pretty bad things, but overall, I think this one was definitely the best of the trilogy that they had. The Hunter trilogy is what people call it, and yeah, I could definitely see why this one was a lot of fun, and I can see why people remember this one the most, especially with the end. But other than that, yeah, I would recommend this one for sure. Definitely check this one out. This one, getting through the Hunter trilogy, yeah, this definitely pays off in the end. So yeah, so next one is Cirque Du Freak in the Vampire Mountain. Vampire Mountain builds on the lore of the vampires and the Vampanese. It's honestly very interesting, though it's very little in this book. Though I really did enjoy a lot of the antics, I guess you can call it, from the vampires, how they get married and don't get married technically, and how they fight, think of it like Saiyans and Dragon Ball Z, but not, if that makes sense. But overall, this book actually opened a lot of doors, and then it actually has a mystery to it, which gets on to the later half of the series. But this is actually where the series for me really picked up to finally get interesting, where earlier on I wasn't too interested, but this one definitely sold it, and it definitely went higher until later on with the Hunter trilogy. It didn't really go anywhere. But the fact that it took this long to get that interesting, it kind of sucks for the book itself. Though I don't really blame the book for that in particular, but honestly, the book is really good, and like I said, when it comes to lore and characters, as usual, they are fun, enjoyable, and yeah, and then once we get a pretty funny, I guess you would call it exploitation, it leads into the next one pretty seamlessly, even though it still is a cliffhanger by all sorts. But it's not bad, and it's harmless at best. But yeah, definitely this one is where the series, for me at least, got very interesting, and everything else afterwards is just pretty good for the most part. Cirque Du Freak and the Lord of the Shadows. With the Lord of the Shadows, this is the 11th book, so this is the second to last, and it's not on the top tier, sadly, though it is a lot of fun still. It goes back to where it all began, in the same city where Darren Shaun first started his adventure. It has some reunions, it's nice and neat, and there's actually a pretty big twist with, the best friend, and then our main character's sister, and yeah, that's the whole thing. And honestly, that could have been a story on its own, but as far as I can tell, this story is kind of self-contained in its own little place. Then again, when it comes to the ending, and that's for the next book after this, this one was a lot of fun still. It showed a lot of lore, and also with what came before this, Lake of Souls, which we'll get to later. This one was definitely in the mid-ground, but it was a lot of fun, action-packed, and all that good stuff. And Darren Shaun is definitely was a lot more better in a main character role as far, after the whole Lake of Souls events and all this stuff here. I really did like this one a lot. It had a lot of things, and especially with Mr. Tiny. Mr. Tiny's just the weirdest guy ever, man. I don't trust that guy. No one should trust that guy. Anyways, I really did like this a lot. This was a really good, enjoyable adventure. Though it may be on the low end in terms of, all over, when it comes to the end, it shouldn't be this low. It should be top tier. But it's okay though. I really did like the story still. I think overall it's still a very enjoyable story. And yeah, so that means this leaves us with the next book, which is Cirque Du Freak and the Sons of Destiny. This is where Darren Shaun and his best friend finally come to blows for the last time. It is one of those ends that you saw coming and then not seen coming. Like I said, this is spoiler heavy and all that stuff. Darren does die in the end. And there's a whole thing with time travel and just fixing the past or the future in a sense by destroying the past of sorts. Making sure Darren Shaun never went to the theater to see Crepsley talking to his best friend and all that stuff. So it's honestly a nice way to look at it. And since it is told in the first person, it's Darren Shaun left all these notes throughout the whole series. Like, think of it like a creepypasta, how they're first person and they're writing it down somehow, and then they somehow tell the story outside of it. Anyways, point is, the Vampanese War comes to a close with these two guys finally duking it out one last time, dying in the end. Mr. Tiny was manipulating from the very start, all that stuff, and trying to have the Son of Destiny, and one of these two guys were gonna be it. And yeah, it was a nice closure of sorts. It'd be a bit cliche for some people, I would say, but honestly, it really did close the chapter pretty well, though sadly, it's not one of the best, as you can clearly tell. This is only in check it out tier. So what does that mean next? What's after this? Well, in tier, I recommend it is Cirque Du Freak and the Trials of Death. The Trials of Death takes place after the Vampire Mountain, and this was really, really a lot of fun. The trials were interesting and fun, and Darren really was doing his best to do whatever he can. Crepsley really became like a father figure, more in this one than he did in the other ones. I really like this is where they really expanded the lore of the Vampanese, and they expanded upon, with the war that might be brewing underneath them, and then a little twist to boot with it. And it was really fun, it was really enjoyable, and I really liked the fact that this one had so much fun with it, even with the stakes being high technically for Darren. But overall, I really like this. This was a really enjoyable adventure, and I'm so glad it took place after Vampire Mountain. And though Vampire Mountain gets a little dull at points because it's a little imaginary, because it's literally a vampire in a mountain, not much you really do there, but the architect's pretty cool. So the next on our list is Cirque Du Freak and the Vampire Prince. The Vampire Prince is a very enjoyable adventure after taking place after the Trials of Death. It really does build upon what we already know, and then the thriller of the mystery that happens at Vampire Mountain, and the conflicts that happen because what Darren failed to do during the Trials of Death. And it really does do a lot, and though the Vampire Prince doesn't really come together until the end, though we already know what the Vampire Princes are, and Darren with the Vampire Prince becoming one at the end is definitely very satisfying. I think this is something that's just really I'm happy with, where we started off with a really cool lore build to the vampires in the Vampire Mountains, as well as getting lore for the Vampanese. And there's some weird, just cool things in the Vampire Mountain that just adds to it. Like I said before, it does make it a little dull since the scenery is about the same overall, which does kind of suck. But Darren Shaun, the writer, tries his best to make it interesting as much as possible with his character writing. And that's what I think Darren Shaun really shines at, is his characters. His characters are always fun, his characters are always enjoyable. So needless to say, this was a lot of fun. And this last one was just really good, and I'm glad it ended in such a high note. Then it dipped off into the bad tier after that. So, it didn't live up to the hype afterwards, but it suddenly got back up though. So, needless to say, this was a really good one. But the next two after this, I think are even better than these guys. Cirque Du Freak and the Tunnel of Blood. The Tunnel of Blood is a really good one. After coming off of, the first and second one, which weren't very good, or they weren't bad, they just weren't as good as you would think they would be if coming from the beginning of the series. But this ended up being really, really good. Where the other ones were just things just happening, this had a whole plot to it with an antagonist to boot, introducing the Vampanese. And it was handled good. I loved the stakes involved and how we got to see what Cressley does on the side of, Cirque Du Freak itself. And yeah, this was a really fun ride, and I really did enjoy the Vampanese part of things and just the overall just stakes of it. And Krebsley being creepy as usual, his little thing, and then, Darren not understanding what vampires need to do. It comes around, and there's a little bit like a little lore of why Vampanese exist and why vampires exist the way they do. There's a lot of things in this book that just worked for me and ended up being one of the most enjoyable books I had until the next book came about. Cirque Du Freak in the Lake of Soul. This was hands down the best that Cirque Du Freak had to offer. This was a very personal story for Darren Shaun and Mel Kopp, or however you say his name, but this was a fun adventure in a different world with dragons. These dragon things exist, and just the whole world is messed up, and then it reveals that it could be the future, but even then the Lake of Souls is used later on in Sons of Destiny, and it's just wow, this one was a really good one. Much more, like I said, personal story more than anything else, and with reveals left and right, and I really enjoyed this one so much. It was such a scary ride, surprisingly, and a really fun ride on top of that too. This is what I think Cirque Du Freak really should have been, but this right here is flat out the best what Cirque Du Freak has to offer. It may not deal with the Vampanese or vampire lore or the war to be concerned, but dang, I gotta say, this right here, this is the best of what Cirque Du Freak is, and I really enjoyed this one. So this is the tier list, guys. This is what I think for the overall stories and just the overall, I guess, series in general. I think the series in general is very good with its characters and just really well designed, and they're just a lot of fun. Honestly, I very had little hate towards the characters. The characters were always fun and enjoyable, even at the lowest point of the story. I still will say, like, even when it comes to the forgettable tier, I would still sit there and say I had some laughs with some of the characters, with Darren Shaun and, the classic characters, just everyone in general. And though it may be a little cliche for how the best friend became the villain, and then the ending, and then trying to go, oh, I have always planned to write this book all along, and blah, 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 blah. Point is, this is a harmless book at best, and a forgettable book at worst. But yeah, I can see why people really did enjoy it. Though from the slow start where it's hard to see where the story can go, and no wonder that movie failed so hard back in the day. But overall, I think this is a good story. If you want to read it, I say really get the book and read it all, I think it's harmless at best. So yeah, definitely get a ranking on this guy. So I give Cirque Du Freak, the series, a ranking of check it out. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and I do appreciate the views. And yeah, like I said, here's another series review, and I'll try to get some smaller books here and there, whenever I can. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.